Okay, and a very warm welcome from Talking Industry for what will be our last Talking Industry of 2023, and we'll look forward to some more in 2024. My name is Andy Pye. I'm consultant editor at DFA Media Group, and we run a range of print and online publications in the manufacturing and automation sector. Talking Industry is sponsored by the Drives and Controls exhibition, #1 UK event for automation, power transmission and motion control. It's taking place next year between the 4th and 6th of June 2024 at our old favourite, the NEC in Birmingham, and it's in association with Manufacturing and Engineering Week 2024, known as with the slogan of Drive the Future. So we hope to see you all there. The website address is www.drives-expo.com if you want any further information. This event today is going to cover, it's become almost an annual event already, robotics and automation and building future growth. So we're going to look again at how can manufacturing industry make the most of the robotics revolution. I think we all know that until now, UK businesses have lagged behind somewhat on capitalising on what we think are great opportunities presented by automation with industrial robots in the UK. And recent research by an organisation called Boston Consulting Group has identified quite a gap between the ambitions of companies to implement robots and the actual implementation of the system. So we're going to try and look at the reasoning behind that gap and what we can do to close it, and maybe a little bit of comparison between where we are relative to our colleagues and competitors in other countries. So we have three excellent speakers today who will engage us in a discussion. It's not a formal webinar in the conventional sense, but it's a panel discussion, so a little bit more like question time than a party political broadcast, if you want to think of it in those terms. And so we'll encourage all of our speakers to get involved all the time, and we'd also like you to get involved all the time. So you are in what's known as listen-only mode, so you communicate with us via the chat, please. There is a Q&A option, but we prefer it if all the questions and comments come into the chat. And please don't hold back anything you want to say in terms of comments, questions, ideas. It's all very, very welcome. And if you feel really brave, we can even turn your video off and allow you to communicate directly with us. So if you'd like to do that and you have a question you'd like to ask in that format, then please let me know in the chat and I will try and involve that as well. So in no particular order, we have Nikesh Mistry, who is the sector head of industrial automation at GAMBICA, and he will be talking a little later on, focusing around the importance of STEM networks in building up our workforce and what's required of them in a robotic environment. We have John Mackey, who's like Nikesh is returning, and he's digitalization sales specialist at Siemens. Making the most of robotics revolution is his title, and he wants to look at again how manufacturing can tackle the big changes. He highlights again skills shortages, but also time to market and sustainability. So we'll hear from John shortly. And first, but by no means the only one, perhaps we'll get him involved first. And the reason we thought that it would be good is Gary is the CEO of LG Motion, and he wants to talk again about closing what he calls the information to implementation gap. But why we thought it would be good to open with Gary this time is that he's mentioned that he's had many open and honest conversations with companies looking to integrate robotic technology into their business. So that's a really good place to start. It may also reflect what you listening on to the webinar may also have experienced. So hopefully it will strike a chord with some of you as well. So I'm going to hand over to Gary, and we'll look forward to what he has to say.
Good morning all, and thank you very much, Andy. So I'm Gary Livingstone, Managing Director of LG Motion, who are designers and manufacturers and integrators of motion control systems across a wide range of industries. So from the film industry to medical development to space and everything in between. So in short, we make things go in and out, up and down, round and round. That's it. So automation and robotics has been my career since I started as an engineering apprentice in 1986. And you'll see from my sporting Movember, I've got the grey hairs to prove it now as well. So robotics and autonomous and automation systems are increasingly crucial for the UK economy. Potential to bring significant opportunities to reduce costs and improve efficiency. So as one of our jobs, we're distributors for TechMan robots, and we have many conversations with customers looking to integrate robot technology into their business. Often the big thing we find is we're uncovering a huge gap between the information to implementation. There's a knowledge gap from where they're starting to where they're ending up. Robots are not a silver bullet to solve every application. So there's quite often a big mismatch in information there. So to bridge the gap between ambition and implementation, it's crucial for businesses to conduct a thorough cost-benefit analysis, particularly investing in employee training and upskilling, and working with industry associations to just overcome the challenges, be it regulatory or financial. Key thing for me is fostering a culture of innovation and adaptation to overcome resistance to change and promote the adoption of automation within the UK. So what I'd like to discuss today and understand that given the UK's reported low productivity, shortage of workers across all sectors, we're talking agriculture, retail, engineering and beyond, what is the seeming reluctance for the UK to invest in automation, in particular robotics, and how do we close the gap from initial interest to installation so UK PLC can benefit? That's my quick intro, Andy.
Let's unmute myself, avoid the schoolboy error. Thank you very much, Gary. Well, let's just pick up on that and ask John and Nikesh for their comments as well. One of the questions that came immediately to mind for me was whether the government understands the importance of automation to the UK economy, what implications we have for that. And obviously at some stage in the relatively near future, we're going to have a change of government. So should we keep our powder dry for 6 months, 12 months, or should we be putting a lot of effort into talking to the current government? I'm not aware of any changes to the Bayes setup. I could be wrong on that, but we may at least be talking to the same people that we were talking to last week. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and thanks again, Andy, for the opportunity to join this. Quite a few, and it's really interesting from what Gary's mentioned there around the information gap, if you will. As Siemens, my role is around supporting customers in industry to adopt digitalization technology. Again, it might sound like a fluffy title, but that's ultimately the sorts of topics that we're talking about within the Industry 4. So that's simulation, it's artificial intelligence and edge computing, but a big part of this is automation and robotics as well. As Siemens, we don't make robots, but we are at the peripheral of an awful lot of them in manufacturing facilities. And I think as Gary's mentioned there is this dichotomy of the skill set needed to get robots applications up and running versus potentially where the robots are then coming in to do potentially low skilled work, in essence, repeatable tasks, these sorts of things. But there's an awful lot of challenges that immediately can be addressed that we're seeing in industry with the adoption of robotics. And I think to touch on Gary's point there, the robot density in the UK is reported at 101 robots per 10,000 workers. Effectively, that is an awful long way behind every other G7 country and puts us 24th in the world, so below the worldwide average. And I think, as us as Brits on the call here, it's probably something that we want to address ourselves and really see where that can, make inroads. From the numbers as well, there's a really good study by the World Robotics Report, and this looks at the industry verticals where robotics are used, and it's exactly where you'd imagine. So it's electrical and electronic manufacturing, and it's automotive. But as Siemens, we're starting to see some of the demands, particularly on the back of COVID, in industries such as food and beverage, where potential for robots is massive. However, the adoption of robots in this vertical is around 5% of worldwide robot usage. I think from an adoption perspective, though, it's really for us to try and lower the barrier to entry. And I think Nikesh will probably come onto this from a skills perspective, but ultimately trying to pay the path for robots to be adopted within industries and not just within the glamorous verticals, if you like, of automotive, but across all areas of our sector in the UK.
Yes, thank you, Nikesh. You've been given an opportunity to lead on from that, so let's hear your early comment.
Yes, no, perfect. Thanks very much, John and Andy. No, that was very interesting to hear, actually. And as you mentioned, I was going to talk more about the STEM and skills side from a GAMBICA perspective, but your few things you mentioned have given me another idea to talk about as well that coincides with that. And just for you all to know, I'm Nikesh Mistry, Sector Head for Industrial Automation at GAMBICA. GAMBICA, we're the trade association for industrial automation, process instrumentation and control, laboratory technology and test and measurement in the UK.
How many members do you have, Nikesh?
We have around 230 plus company members, and within those we've got multiple individuals who come to us for various ideas on best practice. We help to set precedents for the industry and show what our members are doing is the right way and where the industry should be going. Siemens is definitely one of them as well, one of our most active ones. So just to add to that, you mentioned a report, John, and actually there's quite a few different reports at the moment, and that coincides with what Andy mentioned with the government. So GAMBICA, we're involved with Policy Connect and the Manufacturing Commission, who release a number of different reports, and a very recent one which we were part of the ERA Foundation and the MTA and Warwick Manufacturing Group, was the manufacturing productivity and growth in England. And it was all about how we can actually give recommendations to the government to equip our workforce for the future green economy, Industry 4, and keeping STEM subjects at the forefront of the future workforce. And there were actually 10 recommendations within that report. And so, I guess we can probably share it with the viewers at some point, but there were some very key recommendations as part of that report. And some of them that stood out for me were providing SMEs with higher incentives to deliver T-levels, actually funding long-term and short-term campaigns towards STEM subjects, and actually rolling out better use of the apprenticeship levy to help support wider investment in education and training. And I think those are key areas which we need to address as an industry to ensure that those skills are where they need to be. And those areas, T-levels, apprenticeships, and STEM subjects are exactly where we need to focus in order to make sure that our workforce has the right skills for the future.
One of the things that's quite interesting is how this productivity issue might vary according to the size of the companies involved. I think we've touched on it with the the glamour industries, I think was the phrase. But I remember chairing a conference at Birmingham. Oh gosh, it was pre-COVID, so it was a long time ago. And there was a lot of Siemens involvement. and Siemens was making quite a big play of like having a cluster of small, medium-sized enterprises around their organization in Congleton. And some representatives around the table were sort of young people going through apprenticeships, either with Siemens or representing some of the smaller industries around it. Is that still in progress? And well, how's it going? And where do we see it going?
It absolutely is. Effectively, I guess one side of this is the X that's behind me from my background here, but ultimately a lot of Siemens and its UK go-to-market is working with system integrators and SMEs who have the specific vertical knowledge. But again, that skills piece that Nikesh has just mentioned there is a big area that has to be challenged. And ultimately, we kind of see a push from education and academia, but we as Siemens are also trying to influence the academic practices and the curriculum the other way, so almost a pull from industry. We're doing this within some of the SMEs that work with us. So we have a training school in our UK head office in Manchester for digital industries, where we can have accreditations and degree level apprenticeships, which all work towards basically PLC programming, and also now some of this this industry 4 technology around simulation, around things like operational technology to IT integration, but also a little bit around robots as well. On the other side of that, we also have a program called the Connected Curriculum. And this works with partner universities in the UK to equip the students in EEE courses, for example, or increasingly the likes of mechatronics courses, to be equipped really with the skills of the future. And this is something that, again, this is great from a Siemens perspective and our own recruitment, but equally, if these become future customers of Siemens or future partners of Siemens in other areas, then this is equally beneficial for us as well. I think, as Nikesh mentions, though, it needs a kind of an approach that's almost everything from all angles. The other side that we're really looking at from a skills perspective is what we're trying to do around the technology that we're implementing. And this is nothing particularly unique to Siemens, but really trying to open up the barriers that anyone that is doing STEM can have the agility to move across different work streams or different career paths based on the skills that they acquire. For example, I think a good application, and it'd be interesting to get Gary's thoughts on this, would be that there's an awful lot less robot programmers in the UK than there are PLC programmers, but there's an awful lot less PLC programmers in the UK than there are maybe front-end developers or IT programmers as well. If we can start to orchestrate some of these high-level programming languages that the likes of graduates and apprentices are starting to use now in the day-to-day work, and also use the existing ladder logic, we can ultimately open up the skill set of a much broader field of people, of industry, of engineers, to be able to work in these different areas. And ultimately that can aid the adoption of some of these technologies in, yes, the glitzy organizations, but also the SMEs as well.
That's a really good comment. And well, Gary, you may want to comment on that yourself. And the question I was going to ask you as well was, in all the companies you deal with, what is your kind of experience as to how we're going forward as a function of the different size of companies and the different sectors that they operate in?
Okay, I'll take John's points first, Andy. Certainly the programming of the robots has always been considered a bit of a black art. Certainly when you look at the large industrial robots, that was and still is quite a specialist area. The smaller collaborative robots now have got some far easier programming tools, some which are more akin to what PLC programmers are used to, very much a ladder logic and a flow diagram, so it's much easier to understand. And more recently, even companies like Autodesk with their Fusion 360 are actually developing portals to program a multitude of robots without needing the programming language for the robot. So accessibility to the tech has been recognized by many people, and that has been getting developed over the past couple of years. Even some of the robots now, even though they have their proprietary ladder flow of programming, now you can actually break into it and add your own script as well. So people are understanding that the robots, certainly the collaborative robots, they're certainly accessible from a price point of view. You know, to think that somebody could be up and running with a £20,000 robot to instantly make an impact on a line is a relatively small investment for a manufacturing company. The programming now, we have our apprentices and graduates and T-levels. We've got all three going through the factory, and I pretty much guarantee you give a robot now to an apprentice, within an hour you have it doing something meaningful. And people don't realize that actually it's easier than you think. Devil's always in the detail. You can get 80% of the application done in 5 minutes. The other 20% does take a bit more finessing, but essentially you can get a proof of concept pretty quick. Moving on from the training in terms of the types of businesses, I mean, the UK is blessed with many SMEs, but some of them lack the financial resource or even the expertise required for the investment. It's a little bit of a blinkered mindset sometimes, just thinking that robots are expensive. They're not. But you do need to have some good people on board that are willing to take up the responsibility of running the line. So what we've seen is when we've transferred a manual automation line to an automated line, some of the people that are on that manual line need to be upskilled to get the best out of the automated line. So you do need a buy-in from the top of the company, that they do realize buying the robot is the first stage. There is continual investment with the people to actually make the process better and better. And I was also going to, if I have one more thing, robots aren't dedicated just to do one job. Okay, they're a tool like anything else. You can move these robots from task to task. So trying to get people to understand that it's not a fixed investment that stays in one point and it just does one job day in, day out. It can do that, but you can move it around the shop 3-4 times a week if you need to, and the setup times are much reduced.
Yeah. You mentioned, you know, a typical like £20,000 cost of a robot. There's a danger of thinking of it as a cost rather than a return on investment. So how do we get over that barrier? How do we train people to think in the right financial terms?
You want me on that again?
Yeah, you can kick off. Yeah.
That's part of the question. That is what is it that is stopping companies not investing that amount of money? Because £20,000, most robotic applications we see, you can almost see return on investment in 12 to 18 months. And it's understanding, so why the reluctance? From experience, generally you've got the younger, you've got some engineers that are very enthusiastic, can see all the benefits. They struggle to get it through middle management to sign it off. So it's not the youngsters coming through, it's, shall we say, the grey moustache men that for some reason concerned about making the investment.
And I mean, John, you might want to comment on that. I mean, it sounds like we've got a number of age-related issues to deal with, of which this is one.
There is, and this is our challenge as a technology supplier to change the mindset of some of that middle management maybe that you've mentioned there, Gary. I think there is the financial element, yes, but there's also an awful lot that we can look at from a return on investment that is maybe a little bit harder to measure. Some of this could be quality and repeatability. Some of this could be the likes of looking at employee satisfaction and how enthused your employee workforce is. Maybe replacing a repetitive task with a robot to then allow an employee to look at upskilling themselves in a different area and provide training there could be something that gives them more of a sense of belonging within an engineering practice or organization. These are all the sorts of things that I guess from a productivity standpoint also unlock a huge benefit moving forward. I guess the other one that I can probably leave for this one for the time being would then be looking at what we're seeing as an industry from a sustainability standpoint. And if we can use robots to look at improving our quality and also looking at the ESG principles of our organization, there's an awful lot that after that 18 months of payback, or 12 months, as Gary's mentioned, that robots can provide a huge amount of benefit for an organization and a manufacturing environment.
Nikesh, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think there were some really valid points there by Gary and John, touching on the idea that it's not necessarily the direct return on investment that you see from investing in this sort of equipment. It's sometimes like John mentioned, the sustainability side of things, or something else which comes from investing in that technology, which you might not directly see immediately. But I think that's why there's sometimes a hindrance to invest, because they're thinking very straightforward, and if I spend money on this robot, I expect to get the money back directly on a return on investment. But that might not always be the case. You might have upskilled your workforce, and I think it's quite important to not always think about even the younger generations. As Gary mentioned, they are the ones who are more open to these technologies, and not always requiring the newer skills. Sometimes there's people within organizations that have been working for a very long time, and the upskilling or knowledge needs to be sent to them, in terms of letting them know exactly what this new technology might mean for their business. And I think often that is realized once a case study has been shown, or some sort of example has been demonstrated to them, exactly to show, this is what investing in this sort of technology can help you with. So I think there are a lot of positives we've been seeing from a GAMBICA members perspective. In the past 3 years at least, we've seen quite a nice surge in automation products in the trends. We think that there's a number of reasons for that. People are trying to future-proof themselves and build that resilience to prevent all these external shocks that we've all been suffering. So there is a light at the end of that sort of tunnel. And I think when we're talking about keeping our workforce powerful, as we say, I think I'm quite happy that John he mentioned the connected curriculum, which is one of those actually helping the future workforce, which is something that we're trying to do at GAMBICA as well. And that connected curriculum program that you're running actually works with Middlesex and Manchester Metropolitan Uni, which are a couple of our member universities as well. And we've formed the GAMBICA University Industry Council to help bridge the gap between academia and industry. Exactly. So I think all of these things are helping to show that you don't have to be scared of investing in automation, for example.
So it seems we have at least sort of two elements of education to address. I mean, it's been mentioned that there's a lot of work going on with selected universities and getting them involved. Is it a problem that not all universities are being brought on stream as fast as they should? Are they up to speed, all of them, or are there particular ones that are blue ribbon examples? I think a couple of them have been mentioned already. And it's a fast moving technology, so how do you keep courses up to date? How do you keep standards up to date as well from that point of view? It's very hard to keep that relevance going. And then coming back to the age challenge, I mean, we've obviously picked up that we need to encourage middle management people with their silver mustaches to understand how to write business plans, how to justify investment, maybe how to get the finance in the first place. I mean, that's quite a challenge. And how do older people even begin to understand the technology? I like the example of the portal where you don't have to worry about the programming language. It's really focusing more on the end use objective, which is great. I mean, I remember when phones came in, and I mean, I'm still a young man, as you know, and I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. But I remember my kids who are 34 and 40, they took to the phone a lot faster than me. And then for a little while, my niece moved in for 3 years, and she was 16, and I couldn't believe what she could do on the phone. It was just a, totally different world, and I realized at that time maybe I should be put out to grass. So is there a bit of a risk with people's fears as they get older as to what role they're going to play in this robotics revolution, and is that something that's slowing up the change?
I think I can come in on that one, and this probably carries on from Gary's point around that portal environment from Autodesk. On a Profinet side, as an industrial protocol, the standard robot command interface is something that's been developed as an open standard in association with the Profinet Association, to really open up this skill set, as mentioned, to bring out the logic of a robot controller into a PLC environment. There's an awful lot of experience in the UK around PLC programming and ladder logic, as Gary mentioned. So we're not necessarily just talking around, looking at interpolation of robotics within high-level programming languages. We're also looking at this the other way. So that huge wealth of resource that we have of PLC programmers from 20, 30, 40 years or so, to be able to then bring some of this in and lower the barrier to entry is something that this robot command interface does as well. At Siemens, we have this within our own portal, within a robot integrator package, and Gary and I were discussing this earlier on. We have an awful lot of end robot users that are on board with this, so robot vendors that can bring in their logic, their programming environment into a maybe more native, maybe more friendly environment within the Siemens environment for some of those more experienced engineers, for example. But this really touches on something that's quite interesting in a report by Made Smarter. And this is all around innovation of robotics and ultimately adopting robotics. But I do think this becomes a blend, and it's got a 7-stage process of adopting robotics. Number 4 is set the requirements. So really look at something that's quantifiable, that can be measurable, and is achievable, that a robot can do. And that isn't necessarily something that is just necessarily done via the robot programmer. It may also be done by the experienced professionals that work within a manufacturing environment and can understand the processes or the potential benefits that something could bring. So it really is not something that is from a specific demographic. I think it really, is something that from a continuous improvement perspective, we really had to look at within organizations from all backgrounds.
Nikesh, anything you want to add on that side?
No, actually, I think I completely agree with that. I mean, in terms of adding with that, I think it is the whole organization that can be looked at to improve in different areas. And we work with more the automation side of things than robotics, but often we do see the implementation of both. We have member companies who do have robotics, and we are starting to see extra training programs be added to look out for, like we said, not just university graduates, but apprentices, people from T levels, all different backgrounds. And I think that's quite key as well. It's not just, get graduates straight out of university, because they are great and they've got direct access, but there are so many people out there who have the capability to learn such new simple platforms like the one Gary was talking about, and that opens up to everybody. So I think these are all quite key essential areas that we can learn from in order to get the right skills that we need. So yeah, it's about addressing everybody really, and educating them on what it does mean to invest in a robot, and what these robots can do, and what automation solutions can mean for productivity as a whole for your business, really, not just profit.
Thank you. Okay. Just to encourage our audience, do talk to us. Let us know what your thoughts are, what your fears are. We've assembled an excellent panel here to give us the benefit of their expertise. So this is your opportunity. So please don't hold back. Do comment or ask questions, and that certainly helps us as well. So we'd like to hear your opinions. John, shall we move on now to perhaps the issue of sustainability, which was the key thing that you wanted to cover, as well as some of the things we've already covered to some degree?
Yeah, we're going broad, but no, it's yeah, thanks, Andy. It's something that as Siemens we're really passionate about, but ultimately this is built on, I guess, some key stats that I can probably give you from industry as a whole. So 30% of global emissions come from industry. So I guess as an area we've probably profited from the first, second, and third industrial revolution and sort of this consumerism that we sometimes see, and also the amount of technology and development that's really happened rapidly over the last sort of 175 years or so. But ultimately, that means that 38% of energy consumed worldwide is via industry, and by industry I mean sort of process manufacturing and discrete manufacturing industries. And all of this is occurring whilst only 13% of global waste is actually recycled. So it's a huge dichotomy again, and something that obviously can't go on forever.
Was that 13%?
13%, yeah, is recycled globally. So there are massive opportunities in areas within all industry sectors around, I guess, what we would call, but the circular economy. What can we do in terms of giving our products, our services, a second life or a third life back in the field? One of the application areas that we've seen in the UK recently is around looking at recycling and vision systems based on robotics for sorting recycled waste. There's some areas that robotics can be used that are actually not necessarily just aligned with maybe the industries that we think of at the moment, but are huge opportunities where these skill sets can be used in different areas as well. So ultimately, if we can optimize our quality, we've got less waste. If we can upskill our employee workforce to focus on other areas and potentially new skill sets that can add more value and more productivity to our workforce, we've generally then got a slightly sustained outcome. And then if we can start to look at our circular economy, whether that's recycling or whether that is also simply looking at the energy usage, maybe within our production facility, there's a huge sustainability angle that we can see from a robotic implementation that would go down the line as well. And we know that, obviously from Gary, if we're saying that maybe middle management or those maybe detached from the engineering world don't necessarily see the benefits of robots purely on the financial basis, if we're starting to look at some of the net zero commitments that are coming in and the sorts of C-level engagement that we're having to have within organizations, big and small, robots can also be a part of that net zero strategy and story around environmental, social, and governance responsibility too.
Does that help with making a business case, and in what way?
I would say yes, definitely. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on that one, but I think, and this is probably something that we'll start to see from different industry sectors and government legislation over the next sort of 5-10 years or so. But ultimately, the ability to report on some of this maybe resource efficiency has huge benefits. I think from a business to consumer perspective. So, for example, if it's consumer packaged goods, or whether you're looking at buying a battery electric vehicle, or whether you're looking at a more sustainable deodorant, for example, there's consumer bias now towards more sustainable industries, and ultimately that starts with the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions that happen inside a manufacturing facility. So all of this can be something that can give a competitive advantage, yes, but also that sustained outcome, that sustainable conscious manufacturing effort that can occur for manufacturing organizations.
Let's bring in the others. I mean, you mentioned how robotics can make a contribution in things like sorting recycled waste and helping with energy consumption, but perhaps another area is just simply improving the yield of a manufacturing process. How does that? Are there examples where robotics has really contributed in that area? Gary?
Okay, I'll come in here. Particularly with the vision, you're doing real-time QA. So again, with the vision cameras, you can check dimensions, you can check it's the right size. We've done applications that compares barcodes to parts to packing boxes. So again, a customer had an issue with sometimes wrong parts being put in the wrong boxes. put a robot in, you've got 100% quality checked throughout. So that is as John was saying, that is a tangible benefit. There's no scrap, there's no upset customer, there's no sending the wrong part around the world several times to the customer and getting it back again. It's just all resolved in the factory. We're certainly seeing more applications for the quality, because we've got the built-in camera and things like that. Is that almost be it checking the number of screws going into an assembly, afterwards photo taken, and then that's stored with the job file. So if anybody queries, I got this and there was a part missing, you go, no, there wasn't. We checked it all. So big inroads into AI capability, where we're confirming parts and different orientations, again, just to maximize productivity. One of the biggest issues, even as recent as sort of 3-4 years ago, people were buying a robot thinking it would solve all their automation problems, but they weren't actually looking further up the line of how was the part being presented to the robot. So AI has almost come about in 3D picking to try and resolve people being either lazy or unable to present the workpiece in an organized fashion. So now it's just opened itself up to more applications again. But certainly the vision and just about the data it can record and save back to a job file that's there for all ISO regs and traceability is saving a lot of time.
To what extent do you need to implement a robot to just improve an existing process, or to what extent is it best to sort of go back to first principles and redesign the whole process from scratch? I mean, is there a case sometimes a case to do one and sometimes a case to do another?
It's for me, it's case by case. There are some customers you go into and say, actually, I'm sorry, but I don't think you're ready for automation yet. You need to look at a bit more before. Otherwise, and I think this happened probably 4 or 5 years ago, I've seen it, there are cobots that are in factories that have got layers of dust on them. People bought them prior to shutdown as an executive toy, thinking this will be a great thing, this will solve all my problems. Going back to the education, either the person who did know how to run it has left, nothing else has been invested in, and the robot's just sat there as a dust collector. And I can understand how that can then influence other management decisions to say, look, we did this 4 or 5 years ago and it didn't work. Look, it's stuck over there gathering dust. That's a cultural issue. They need to upskill their workforce and get the robot working, or understand why the robot was asked for in the first place.
And I suppose a corollary of that is you need a multidisciplinary team to look at the whole process from the start, don't you, rather than kind of individuals just looking in a more narrow sense.
Yeah.
And to continually getting the best out of the robot, ideally you want the skill set at the customer. So it becomes far more cost effective. And I think we touched on it with that these people in the business already know the job. There's no good a robot engineer coming in telling them how to do their job. No, they're helping automate it. The people already in the business know what's required, and they're the people most capable of developing the process to be the optimum.
So Nikesh, you've got more than 200 companies. Now there must be a huge variation in company size, company profile. How many of those, how does that spectrum break down in terms of their willingness, ability or relevance to the robotics and automation argument?
It's an interesting question, actually, because we are made up of, as you say, multiple sizes of companies. We've got SMEs, large multinationals, and some companies that are quite small as well, below SME level. And it does vary per sector in terms of the adoption of automation and robotics. I mean, coming from the industrial automation perspective, I could happily say that most of the members in the industrial automation market are pro automation, and the products that they are discrete manufacturers of equipment that actually helps many businesses and end users automate their systems. So we are promoting it in a positive way. So I think that's one part of it. However, when you look at other sectors, you know, I know, for example, there is a large number of SMEs in the laboratory technology sector, and their adoption of technologies such as these are a lot slower that we've seen compared to the industrial automation technologies. You know, ironically, even the process of building, you know, drives and controls and switch gear and control gear, those processes are a lot more further automated than some of the labs that we see in the laboratory sector. So I think that comes down to what Gary and John were talking about, that knowledge piece about what investing in a robot might actually provide you with. And I think, you know, those knock-on effects such as, you know, Gary mentioned AI. I think the real-time monitoring of, you know, robotic systems is changing the way we do things. You know, you don't have to necessarily go on site to check your robots. You can remotely, remotely maintain them, which is actually something that, you know, optimizes, you know, production schedules and all sorts of things like that. So, you know, it's all about streamlining your processes. And I think once these benefits are made apparent, I think that helps, helps that understanding. So, you know, there are big differences between companies' adoption, but I think it comes down to, you know, making sure that, you know, they've got the means. You know, it does, as you said, you know, it is an investment in the first place. But I think, you know, we mentioned before about the government. I think support there for the SMEs could help them get on their way for sure.
Yes, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. John, is there anything you want to add? I'm going to kind of move on to a pseudo-political element in a minute, but before I do, perhaps we could just get your comments on that. What Gary?
Yeah, I think just on the back of what Gary and Nikesh was saying there, I think another area that we also see a big benefit of an adoption of technology is for robotics is in a simulation environment. As Gary mentioned, the adaptability of robots and cobots is something that maybe isn't always thought of. Potentially that could be the barrier to entry for the likes of laboratory labs and these sorts of systems where there's not necessarily the scalability and repeatability of a certain process. It's a bit more experimental. But the ability to simulate is generally something that is in most robot vendors' software suites. And this isn't necessarily just for sort of software and loop testing and commissioning. This can also be brought in with other peripheral processes that are happening. So, for example, it could be a conveyor system, or it could be a 3D picking system as well. So the idea to have this software and loop simulation is brilliant, because it ultimately reduces the number of prototypes that are needed, gets you online faster with your application. But also this simulation can sit alongside the development of a process so that you can start to look at these adaptable different processes or challenges that you're looking for your robot to address. It's something that is part of, you know, many organizations offering. It's something that we pride ourselves on at Siemens, but the adoption of this really just makes sense for industries and for robots to really get the best out of their assets and sweat them, if you like, for all that they're worth.
Is the biggest potential for robots in mundane applications, or is it in blue sky applications that, you know, are developing from scratch? I mean, or is it hard to say?
I think traditionally, we've always looked at it. If it's dull, dirty, or dangerous, get a robot to do it, and that sort of figures for probably 90% of all the applications.
Yeah.
Then the definition of dull then comes into it. What we term as dull, some people find quite exciting, but it's the experimental for robots. Yeah, I'd agree with John. Use some simulation to actually speed some of that up, but robots are there as a tool that again is that education. It's not just a fixed bit of plant. It's a tool that you can get to do multiple things. So in the development labs, except that it's a lower take up, but it's certainly got value.
Right. Well, let's pick up now on comment we've got in the chat here. Funnily enough, early this morning, I was looking at some comments about the German economy, which, as we know, is going through a difficult time, mainly due to its energy issues with Russian gas and so on. And it was being said that the age demographics in Germany is going to be a big problem in terms of enabling them to recover from their current sort of slight recession position. But I couldn't help thinking, I think our age demographics is pretty similar in that our birth rate is low, we have large numbers of aging people, and both of these seem to be huge opportunities for robots to fall in and replace a lot of those skill shortage challenges. And the comment in the chat is saying, well, in 2022, industrial robot installations climbed by 3% in the UK to 2,534 units, which is less than a tenth of Germany's total sales. So that doesn't seem to paint a very attractive picture from the UK's perspective. And so, you know, what can we do to compete more effectively globally and not get left behind? Yeah, there's a curveball.
Yeah, I think some of this may come back to what I mentioned previously. So around automotive really being the industry that drives a lot of robot adoption. So obviously, the German market is huge for automotive. But that said, I don't think that's the only reason. I think that's one of a few factors there. Working at a German organization, it's something that we see the appetite to invest in the industrial sector is something that's maybe a little bit more proud in Germany. And I think we in the UK probably have to make the best of what we have from a government legislation perspective. I think Gary will probably was mentioning around the things like R&D funding for small to medium enterprises. Again, that could be potentially used from a treasury perspective to look at reducing tax around specific challenges in R&D. I think, though, this may also touch on something that Nikesh mentioned. I mean, the UK is exceptionally strong in pharmaceuticals and life sciences. Maybe there's an element here that because we're maybe stronger in the lab rather than the production environment versus our German counterparts, that maybe that's also another reason for the lack of adoption here. But I think really it's to address the skills, to look at a mindset shift and probably really focus on maybe non-financial metrics such as sustainability, such as safety, and an empowered workforce as well.
Yes, I mean, you mentioned mind shift. In fact, we've just had another comment come in from Davod, and he's saying how much of the resistance is really fundamentally a mindset change. How do we force that mindset change? How do we encourage it, maybe?
I think it's really you're going to need government assistance to support any initiative. So we can go around banging the drum, but actually some of it will come down to hard cash and regulation changes. So I think the mindset change, consistent education at all levels, including talks like this, Andy, is just, but we do need support for innovation. So there needs to be a bit of a safe environment for businesses to be able to look at automation without actually hitting the bottom line too much. So you need to see that it's de-risked. That's where I would say where you're more likely to get a change in mindset.
Is it still possible to get, I believe it is, to get tax breaks on development work, not just research, but applied development work as well? Something we touched on in a previous Talking Industry, where you can put in applications to get tax relief against the development work that you're doing, not just pure research, but work in factories and so on, which is new materials. Anybody got any experience of that? Because if so, it would be very attractive, wouldn't it? Because it would get a lot more people on the, thinking about adopting robotics as
And I think that's part of the thing really is you've got the capital allowances. Potentially you could go for the R&D tax claims.
Yeah.
In recent years, or this year in particular, they've made it much more difficult to make a claim. So
Right.
again, the messages that are being sent out is not to try and innovate.
Mm.
You know, there's okay, being a little poking the bear a little bit here. Have we just had too much governance at self-interest of self-interest? It's actually affected the top level of industry, and therefore they're reluctant to actually make the changes for the good of all.
Yeah, and I guess long term as well, which is the other side of that, isn't it? It's a very interesting point. Adding
Sorry,
on to the
there,
comment about,
Andy.
sorry, John, go on.
I think another, from, I guess, working at a global organization, the other side of this, outside of Germany, that we probably compare ourselves to a lot would be the likes of the Inflation Reduction Act in the US and the adoption of technology there, the sort of exponential curve and take up through, I guess, a more of an onshoring perspective. If that's something that we want to look at in the UK side, the likes of the Inflation Reduction Act could be a good model to work towards with an industrial strategy from our government. I think, as Gary mentioned, we can do all we want here, but we're kind of confined to the frames of funding and potentially government resource. But the likes of the, I guess, aggressive industrial policy with the Inflation Reduction Act is the sort of thing that we're seeing kickstart great adoption of technology. Some of that is robotics. There's an awful lot of that that's not. But this is probably the sort of thing that a more defined industrial strategy could leverage the benefits in the UK.
Yeah, I think, and just to touch on that, I think it's also to do with the longevity of the schemes that they put into place. For example, I think Gary mentioned the capital allowance super deduction that they were offering that ended in March, April this year. Something that they were rolling out, the super deduction allowing you for 130% capital allowance on machinery investment. Now, if they had rolled that out for maybe a 5-year period, we might see a different change. A lot of member companies that we were seeing straight when they were implemented straight after the pandemic, they were trying to sort out supply chain issues or other areas that, recruitment and shortages of staff. So that was their main focus. So they might not have had the time at that point to then invest in the machinery that they might have wanted to. So government schemes that were rolling out perhaps for a longer period of time might then start to benefit these areas. And, it's not always, a short-term strategy, like John mentioned, the industrial strategy. It might have to be a long-term and short-term list of goals that we'll be able to target.
Well, I think this is quite a good point to lead on to your comments, Nikesh, and thanks for your patience because it's 11 o'clock already. The end of that comment was high adoption nations maybe have a more cohesive industrial strategy and funding, which is very much what you were talking about in terms of the GAMBICA industrial strategy and others who no doubt see it in the same way. So tell us a little bit more about that, how you see the prospective new government maybe looking at some of these areas in a different way to the current government, or will it be the same, or don't we know? And then go on to your pet project of STEM education.
Yes, well, it's always difficult to say what the government might want, to do in terms of their industrial strategy, because, as we know, it was scrapped before, and we weren't sure where they were going to go from that. But from a GAMBICA member's perspective, we are constantly in discussion with BEIS, Department for International Trade, and a few other departments, where we are telling them exactly what our members feel about the adoption. So we're actually producing a manifesto in line with other associations at the moment to make sure that we're all aligned in what we will propose towards the government. Whether it's the existing government or a new government, we're not sure. Nobody really knows the ins and outs of when the general election will be. But what we've decided at GAMBICA is to make sure that we've got something in place for them. And I think many other organizations are the same, because it is important to stress, how the industry are feeling. Manufacturers would like to see before any manifesto from the government actually gets sent out. So we are working on it, and it's something that I think a lot of organizations find very, very important at the moment. And ironically enough, that doesn't directly tie into what we're doing about STEM. Keeping it very separate. The government and our targets within our future workforces, and that they're not directly aligned in that sense. It's a separate initiative that we're running together to focus on STEM. Sorry, Andy.
No, that's fine. I mean, let's go on to your comments on STEM, though. I'm sorry, I probably gave you two completely disparate discussion points there. But what more do you want?
Well, it was difficult to find synergy between.
About the STEM
I mean, I know the government should be promoting STEM as well. Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned the University Council earlier. We've got 16 members on that council, 8 universities and 8 industry members who are working towards to bridge the gap between academia and industry. And they have a STEM working group where we're working on trying to promote STEM in universities. But then on top of that, at GAMBICA, another initiative we've been running is our Young Council. And that's made up of 16 individuals from all member companies. And they call themselves the Young Council, but they're not necessarily all young. It's young in their industry career. So that means first 10 years of their industrial career. So they might have come from all different backgrounds, as I mentioned before. We've got some apprentices, we've got some from university, we've some who've done neither, and just started working in their business and worked their way up through that from a young age. So really bright group of individuals who all have different ideas. And they're all big STEM ambassadors at the moment, which is something that's quite important to us. And they're also helping roll out more STEM ambassadors in GAMBICA members. So attending things like the Big Bang Fair and going to events in schools where we can promote STEM subjects. And I think it's quite important because, going into a school, a primary school, for example, when you've got a group of, young individuals who are, who can demonstrate success, it's quite nice for the future generations to look at them and relate to them and say, I would like to do what that person's doing, and, get rid of the stigmas that are behind STEM subjects, that people don't always see them being, the most attractive industry to be in. But, when you've got a group of individuals being able to go into schools or other, facilities or youth centres and things like that to actually spread the word of what it means to be in a STEM career, I think that really, really changes the perspective of the younger generation. So it's a very powerful scheme. It's very promising, actually.
How do you measure the effectiveness of it? And I mean, I guess that there's so much to do. It's difficult to do enough. But how do you measure the effectiveness of the image of engineers in?
Because there is no direct way.
Yes, sorry.
Hopefully that's not my signal.
I think it's back. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. No, that's actually a really interesting point, because there is no direct way to measure exactly the influence that we could have. It comes down to if we change the mind of a few students that we come across, then that goes a long way. It's very difficult to quantify exactly how much influence you can have in that space, but I think that's not a good enough excuse to not do it. That means you just have to keep at it and work hard and make sure that you're sending the right messages. We've mentioned AI and things like that. There are still biases in these new technologies. You go onto a platform like ChatGPT and search, an engineer will search for CEO or something like that, and there are still a bias that comes up in the pictures that might come up, or the images or the descriptions even. So we need to start eliminating those before we look at anything else as well, to prevent those biases too.
Gary, I mean, what's your position on developing the sort of ideas that Nikesh has expressed there about getting more involvement with young people into engineering careers?
You're almost preaching to the converted, Andy. I mean, as I said, I went through an engineering apprenticeship. Best thing, everybody should be done. Everyone should do it. I'm biased, okay? It's a brilliant grounding, and it allows you to go off into almost any career you choose, because you get the basic good solid engineering grounding. Always been a big supporter of apprentices, so we take on apprentices. We've taken on graduates. We've sponsored PhDs. So again, from entry level, we've currently got a couple of T levels going through. Huge supporter of opportunity to our youngsters. Okay, it's great to see them develop. At the same token, I normally find that the teachers need some more teaching. So it's not the students that are the issue, it's the lecturers that are sometimes so wrapped up in academia, they forget there's a real world out there. And they're not able to offer advice or guidance as to the opportunities that are outside of their academic silo. So I certainly do a lot of work with our local technical college. I was governor there for about 8 years, trying to improve the engineering department and what they could do. They still haven't bought a robot off of us yet, though, so I've still got to work on that. But then you've got companies like Reading University were a leading light in robot tech, and then industry came and poached every single one of the lecturers, and the department shut down. So there is still, people know that there's value, but whole university department shut because it just got cleared out. So industry has to look at itself a bit. If you're trying to actually bring people through, you do need to support education as well, and not just pilfer it.
Yeah.
John, you must have some strong views. I mean, I know Siemens is very much in this area.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that reference from Reading. I think my undergraduate degree was physics, and this is always something that I thought there was a difference between exactly what you mentioned there, Gary, a silo of academia and the immediate projects and research going on versus what can scale, what does industry need and want, and what's going to be commercially viable and sustainable for the next sort of 10, 20, 30 years. We're constantly trying to upskill the lecturers that are part of the connected curriculum partnership in the program there. So that is something that we are looking at the latest technology, making sure that these are skills not just for the next year or the year after, but for 10, 20, 30 years or so. So yeah, trying to teach the teachers is really something that the connected curriculum does. And that's really by workshopping and training that we do within the product managers and the sales specialists and the general product owners that sit within the likes of Siemens. And on the connected curriculum, there are some other partners as well. So some of the technology partners such as Festo that come into this, and obviously from a GAMBICA perspective as well. I think really it's trying to appeal to these engineers, and one thing that we do look to do is really look at STEM outreach. So whether that is looking at going into schools, whether that's looking at going into technical colleges as well, or simply things like the IET events, so the Engineering and Technicians Institution. So really promoting what engineering means today and trying to shift a lot of the mindset from potentially oily gloves and overalls versus what can be a really fulfilling and as Gary mentions, an adaptable career that can lay the foundation for a lot of opportunities down the line.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our allotted time, so there's just a couple of things I think I'd like to just cover quickly. we've started to get into the field of artificial intelligence and machine learning and the contributions it can make. We've also had you know, a recent meeting between Richie and Elon Musk. There's a feeling that it provides, you know, is it a fear or an opportunity to get involved with AI and machine learning, and how do we deal with that particular issue? Nikesh, go on. Let's throw a curveball at you.
Sure, I happily accept that, and I don't think it should be not necessarily feared. It just needs to be used correctly. You know, I think it comes down to, it's parallel with robotics. You know, use the right tool for the right application. You know, don't just use AI for the sake of using AI. You know, it's such a powerful tool. There is so much that it can do, and it's very, you know, goes hand in hand with machine learning. You know, there's a very fine line between what we know as machine learning. We've learned and grown up with it for a very long time, so it's not like it's a brand new you know, piece of equipment or software or anything like that. And AI is exactly the same, but it's about being used very carefully, and, you know, making sure that, as I mentioned before, we eliminate early biases or eliminate wrong misinformation, which we all know that can be spread in the media or other areas. You know, so we don't want AI to send out misinformation, but it can be used as a very powerful tool and should be used. I don't think it should, you know, I don't think we should fear it. We should embrace it as any other technology. I don't know if Gary or John want to jump in and either disagree or agree, but
yeah, I think exactly that. And I think the other side is that this isn't something that's necessarily going to steal someone's job either. There was it's before obviously I was born, but when the computers were introduced, the top 10 sort of fields of employment, everyone feared that computers were going to take over their jobs. And ultimately, the same study was done, and what the top 10 fields of employment were, they were exactly the same. Number 11 was then software developer after the development of a computer. So, you know, things, whether it's, you know, a receptionist, an engineer, a doctor, obviously everyone uses computers. It becomes part of the way that we work. I think AI is going to be exactly the same. So it might not be that someone, as our CEO Roland Bush said, it might not be someone, or AI takes your job, but it might be that someone using AI can do something better. So I think it's definitely something to jump in two-footed and look at it and understand how it can optimize and be useful in your business.
Definitely. Gary.
Yeah, I mean, AI is certainly ideal from an engineering point of view in terms of inspection. You're actually looking at conditional, you know, conditions that are pass or fail, product identification, pattern recognition, and predicting results based on those patterns. It's another tool. I say it's just, you understand what it can do and what you want it to do, and it's a perfect tool. But in a world full of data, you're trying to make better decisions based on the data available, and AI should be allowing you to make better decisions.
Yeah, so we're all taking the positive view on that one, which is great. So we just had a comment from Mark Jeffries, just to say, an interesting topic, and as a manufacturer of complementary products, we're facing similar challenges in technology uptake. So we'll get in touch with Mark outside the discussion and see where that leads us, which will be great. And it's a good point to bear in mind that these webinars are the start, not the end of our interactions. The recording is available on demand for those who registered but weren't able to attend, and for anyone who wants to see it a second time. We'll send through lots of detail of some of the reports and that were mentioned as part of the discussion as well. I think there are at least 3 really good reports that we can refer to, and anything else that the panelists feel might be useful to provide a compendium of information. So we'll certainly do that. And just to finish, I'll just have a quick round robin, starting with John. Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years' time in terms of our implementation of robotics and automation?
I think we will be far beyond where we are today, but I think we will still be trailing some of the other G7 countries. At the moment, if we can turn the tide, great. But I think what I'd say would be to look at the Made Smarter report and the other reports you mentioned today, engage with technology vendors, and also use things like the catapults that are part government funded and provide a safe space for some of this trial and error.
Great stuff. Nikesh, same question to you.
Yeah, just to double onto that, the catapults, your associations, your training centres such as the MTC, all of these areas, Make UK, we're all giving promotions into areas of technology adoption. So use the experts. You're not on your own. The industry, we're all in this together. So I think it's a collaborative effort. If we are going to get better at adopting robots and automation in the future, it is a collaborative effort, and I think we need to do it as an industry as a whole. And remember that the more we help each other and spread the word about education and knowledge about what can be done with robotics and automation, the more the investment and implementation will happen. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And Gary, last word.
Okay, well, the technology isn't going away, so it's only going to keep progressing. So the tools to use it will only get better. The speeds, the reliability, the adaptability, all of this is just going to keep on getting better. And when you think coupled with labor costs going up, energy costs coming up, sustainability being a bigger thing on the issue, automation is really the only way to tackle some of these problems, because automation is a relatively fixed cost, and its energy consumption is probably less than a person. So it's almost, if you want to keep up and progress, you have to look at automation, but please go into it with open eyes and get good advice.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. Well, we all agree on that. Yeah, automation is entirely compatible with the needs of the planet going forward, energy saving, net zero, all of those things. So we will turn the tide, to use that phrase. So thank you very much for our panelists for an inspiring discussion this morning. And thank you to all those who've attended. I hope you found it worthwhile. We'll be in touch with everybody and we'll look forward to that. So in terms of turning the tide, this is King Canute signing off, and we very much look forward to the next Talking Industry in the new year. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.